What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about this guy right here, the Nintendo Switch 2. It's finally out. It's been out for about a week and a half at the time I'm recording this video, and I want to give you my initial thoughts and I guess sort of a review on the system and its hardware. And wrapping into a review of the hardware, I want to talk about Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, because I do want to give my thoughts on this game and kind of the whole discourse around it, but I also don't have enough thoughts on it to make up a whole video. So I'm wrapping it into this one, and that makes sense, right? Because it essentially is a tech demo. It pairs nicely with a discussion about this new hardware. So is this system worth $450? Is it a big enough leap from the Switch 1? That's what we're going to discuss today. So let's get right into it, right? The first thing you're going to notice about the Switch 2 is it is so much sleeker than the Switch 1. Now, I have my Switch OLED packed away in a box somewhere. I'm going to sell it on eBay because really this has completely replaced it for me in a way that I honestly didn't really think it would because of that OLED screen and how nice it was. But I'm just using the Switch 2 for everything. Even if I'm playing a game without Switch 2 upgrades like Xenoblade 3, which I've been really playing a lot of recently. That's probably, funnily enough, my most played Switch 2 game is Xenoblade Chronicles 3 that came out 3 years ago, because I've just been loving that game so much, and I started a playthrough before I got my Switch 2. But my point in bringing up the Switch OLED is that that device was pretty sleek, right? The bezels weren't too big, the console wasn't that thick. Obviously, that OLED screen is beautiful, but this console makes it look like a children's toy. I mean, this thing is really slick. Obviously, the matte black finish is really nice. I don't know if it comes through on the camera, but you can see there's little, white dots inside of the matte black finish, so it's a little bit sparkly. The Switch 2 logo on the back shines a little more than you'd expect, and it just feels nice to hold. And going back to the Switch OLED before I packed it away in that box over there, it feels so much smaller in your hands than this one. It is so weird to go back to the Switch OLED, or even the Switch Lite, which is currently dead right now, so I can't really give you a great comparison, but I mean, look how much bigger this Switch 2 is than the Switch Lite. That's not really a shocking thing, right? This is a very small console, but going back to it and holding it in my hands just feels weird after using this absolute beast of a system. It's big, but it's not bulky like a ROG Ally or some of these PC handhelds that have come around. I don't think it's a coincidence that the first thing Nintendo showed us about this system in that hardware overview in the Switch 2 Direct was that it's the same thickness as the Switch 1, because that really makes it feel like a premium piece of technology, because it's so big, but it's not overbearing, and it's not too thick. And with a bigger console comes bigger controllers with it for a console like the Nintendo Switch. And the Switch 2's JoyCons are a good bit bigger than the Switch 1's JoyCons, and of course they advertise that in the Switch 2 Direct. The joysticks are bigger, though I don't know if they're significantly bigger than the Switch 1. I think some people will still find them a little small. Like, I don't got the biggest hands, I don't got the biggest fingers in the world, so it works for me. But I don't know, if you're like Shaquille O'Neal, you might still find these a little bit small. The coolest thing about these new Joy-Cons are the Easy Glide joysticks, which I guess I should hold them up to the microphone. You don't even hear them glide around, and they are just as smooth to feel. Using your thumb to move the Joy-Cons in a circle is smoother than ever. There was kind of a tactile feel to using the joysticks on the Switch 1. They would click whenever you went in a direction, which is fine. It wasn't bad. I still liked those joysticks, but the smoothness of these ones are really something to behold. I've heard it's an even smoother experience on the Pro Controller, which I didn't pick up day one, but I will pick up eventually. But these joysticks are really nice. And again, that added size makes them more realistic to use in something like, oop, I hit the mic, and that was never gonna end well. They make them easier to use in something like a Joy-Con grip. And I've actually been using the Joy-Con grip more, not just out of necessity, but out of the fact that I think it is a lot more comfortable than the Switch 1's Joy-Con grip, which was slippier and smaller, and while I do still use it from time to time, or I guess I did still use it when I was using my Switch 1, it wasn't the most comfortable thing in the world. This obviously isn't a Switch 2 Pro controller, but if it's all you got, if you're just buying the system and you don't have 80 more bucks to shell out for a Switch 2 Pro controller, this is a pretty good alternative. And hey, the charging grip is only 30 bucks more, I believe, so that could be another good purchase too if you don't want to go all the way for a new Pro controller. Another cool thing about the Joy-Cons, obviously, is the magnets. I mean, look how slick that is. Oh, it's so satisfying to just snap them in and out. I love doing that. I have gotten my fingers caught in between the magnetic connections a few times. Not fun to do that, but man, just going snap, 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 in and out. Nothing more satisfying than that. And it really does work. The connection is really strong, a lot stronger than those rails on the Switch 1. There's not really any wiggle to the Joy-Cons on the Switch 2. I guess a little bit if you really want to nitpick. But compared to the Switch 1, where like you could literally just, you know, hit the Joy-Con and have it come out of the rail without pressing that button, that's not going to happen here unless you really force it out. And honestly, that is maybe the biggest and most necessary improvement to the original Switch, because as good as those rails were and as revolutionary as they seemed in 2017, they needed an upgrade. Those things did not stay together after prolonged use. I would imagine these magnets are going to be just fine, even years after using this console. And obviously, the other new feature of the Joy-Con 2 is mouse mode. And I'm here to say, I really like mouse mode. I wasn't sure how much I was going to enjoy it when it got leaked all the way back on Christmas, that this thing had a mouse sensor on it. But using it a little bit in Welcome Tour and some other apps, I do quite like it. I think it is really intuitive. These little Joy-Con grip things that were included with the Switch 1 were pretty much useless back in the day, but the Joy-Con 2 version of them are anything but useless. They give you these sizable mouse feet with which to use in mouse mode, and that really improves the mouse mode experience for me. These little feet are really smooth, and look, it's not exactly like using a mouse, but it's not terrible. Obviously, the real test is going to come in a few months with Metroid Prime 4. How does it feel to use mouse controls in a real deal FPS like that? We're not going to know until we play it, but I think it's going to be pretty satisfying to use. And I love how seamless it is going from normal controls to mouse controls. All you have to do is go from this to this, and it just automatically detects that you want to use the controller in mouse mode. There's no switch you have to flip in the menu or in the hardware settings. You just put it on the table and it does the rest. I think that is so intuitive, and that's really what makes mouse mode a difference maker for me, is that there's no hassle using it whatsoever. And that's why I think I am going to be using it for a game like Prime 4 and eventually a game like Splatoon 2, because it really is that intuitive. Also, I do like how you can put the blue strap with the orange Joy-Con. That's kind of a mind F, so to speak. Now, let's talk about the thing that I think has been most controversial about the Switch 2 Online since its release: the screen. Obviously, this is an LCD panel on the Switch 2. Gone are the days of that beautiful, smooth OLED display on the 2021 model. This is an LCD panel, but trust me, it is a lot better and a lot more vivid than that LCD panel from the original Switch in 2017. The one thing that I think really separated the Switch OLED from the original Switch in terms of its screen was how vibrant the reds came out on the screen. And the reds aren't quite as saturated and they don't pop quite as much on this display, but I think you can just tell from that GameCube logo there, they still pop a good deal. The downside, of course, to going back to an LCD panel is that it's not quite as bright, which is, of course, annoying just in terms of I like having a bright screen. I always turn my brightness all the way up. I know that's sacrilege to some people. It's especially annoying when playing outside because the screen, you know, again, isn't the brightest. I do think the OLED is brighter, and the biggest reason that the brightness is an issue is because one of the features touted for this Switch 2 screen is HDR. And I'm no screen nerd, I'm no expert on this stuff, but it appears that the Switch 2 screen is just not bright enough to give you a truly good HDR experience. I think for me, HDR is a lot more of an improvement in dock mode, where my monitor displays HDR pretty well. It's a pretty bright monitor. Obviously, it has, you know, HDR built into it. So I feel like I notice the improvements a little more there. Whereas on this screen, I don't think it's the biggest jump from the Switch OLED to this. I don't think HDR is a selling point, is my point with this screen. And the other thing I'm not sold on being a selling point for this Switch 2 screen is 120 Hertz and VRR. Now, I was super excited for the 120 Hertz display when they announced it in the Switch 2 Direct. I thought it was going to be a game changer. Not only could you use that VRR display to get games running smoother if they couldn't hit 60, but for games that aren't as demanding and have the ability to go above 60 frames, there would be reason to do so because there was a guarantee that every single Switch 2 user would have a 120Hz display. No longer is it predicated on what kind of monitor you have. Every single user can take advantage of 120Hz. So that's why I thought it would be a game changer, because I thought a lot of these developers would make it a point to put a 120 FPS mode in their game. And obviously we are very early in the Switch 2's lifespan, and there's not a lot of games, first or third party, released on the system yet, but early returns on 120 frames per second are not great. I believe the only game right now that actually supports 120 FPS. Oh shoot, I just opened a Xenoblade fight. That's what I wanted to do. I believe the only game that supports 120 FPS is Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and it's only in that one mini game where it has you tell the differences between 60 and 120. Shinin, the developers of Fast Fusion, did say they will work on a 120 FPS mode for later, but as it stands, there's not really any way to see the difference and to take advantage of that 120 FPS display. Besides, I guess, a game like Cyberpunk, which runs in 40 FPS, taking advantage of that VRR panel. But I guess I'm just hoping that feature doesn't go by the wayside. I'm hoping that developers make it a point to add 120 FPS modes in their games down the line. We know that Prime 4 is getting a 120 FPS mode on the Switch 2, but I don't think we know of any other games that plan to add it, first party or third party. So I'm hoping that that becomes a bigger feature as developers get more used to this new system and developing games for it. Because as it stands here a week and a half after launch, it feels like HDR and 120 FPS and VRR weren't the most necessary additions in the world, and I would imagine they probably could have gotten the console down to $399 if they didn't feel the need to add those features. And obviously that's just conjecture, who actually knows, but I wonder if these features were worth the additional price, and I hope these are two features that pay off in the long run. But as it stands now, I'm not totally sold. Again, I'll wait till Prime 4 to make my final judgments on whether 120 FPS was worth it, because that could totally rip in a game like Prime 4. We'll just have to wait and see. And sidebar, that's a reason why it would have been nice to have Prime 4 as a launch title. I think for the health of that game, it's best that it didn't launch alongside Mario Kart World, but man, would it have been nice to have a first-party Nintendo game that showed off 120 FPS and showed off mouse controls, and that's another game that's probably going to look great with HDR. What are you going to do? All we can hope is that that game isn't like a November title or something. I'm still praying that maybe, just maybe, that's an August game, but as it seems like we're not going to get a June Direct, I think that's highly unlikely. One more negative I have about the system, and it's an obvious one, the battery life. It is not great. I've pretty consistently been getting like 2 to 4 hours with my battery life, and yes, I did reset the battery or whatever that Nintendo told people to do, because apparently the battery was glitched and it wasn't showing right. I don't know, that's another like way over my head kind of thing, but I did what Nintendo said, and it definitely is better after doing that, but I still think the battery life is kind of mediocre. Again, the game I've been playing most on my Switch 2 is Xenoblade 3, because I really want to get through it, and even that game eats up battery life, and that's a game that I feel like I could play for 6 to 8 hours no problem on my Switch OLED, which had an incredible battery inside of it. On this console, again, I haven't timed it out, but it seems like 2 to 4 hours for even a game like Xenoblade 3 is the expectation, which is pretty disappointing. I'm sure a firmware update will roll out eventually that'll help the battery life of the system somehow, but as it stands, the battery life is pretty mediocre. And on a game like Mario Kart World, you're just gonna get 2 hours whether you like it or not. That game is pretty darn demanding. It obviously looks and runs incredibly well on the Switch 2, but the downside is that you're not going to get a lot of playtime without having it in the charger. But honestly, that isn't a huge deal to me because I always carry a battery pack wherever I go. If I bring my Switch on the train or something and I need to charge it, I can do that pretty easily. But I know it's going to be a huge issue for some people, and it has been an annoyance for me even still. But let's talk about what might be the biggest improvement between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, and that's the eShop and the NSO app. They load so much faster. It is unbelievable how much better both of those apps are. I mean, the eShop, you all know, was utterly unusable on the Switch 1. If you wanted to open the eShop and search for a game, it might have taken you upwards of a minute. Now it'll take you like 10 seconds max. It is so much faster, so much smoother, and the eShop experience is a lot better as well. It'll give you game recommendations, your wish list is on the front page, trailers will play automatically, which is a pretty cool new addition that, I mean, the Switch One might have exploded if it tried to play a trailer on the front page of the eShop with how slow it was running already. So the point is, the eShop is usable again, which is a huge deal. So happy about that because I do enjoy scrolling these stores and looking for, games on sale, slept on games that look interesting. I do that a lot on the Microsoft store, which runs like a breeze. And I'm glad that it's possible to do that on the eShop now because it simply wasn't on the Switch One. Another app that's faster, like I said, is the NSO app. And the NSO app is something that I didn't touch whatsoever on the Switch One. They added it a while back, of course, but they recently gave it a complete overhaul. Now you can see every single game included in NSO on that NSO app. And if you click on it, you can launch it without having to go to the specific NSO app. You can launch it right from the NSO app itself. Now, obviously, I tried that out on the Switch One and it took a while, but on the Switch 2, you can go to the NSO app and load a game in about 10 seconds. It is really snappy, and it's a much more convenient way to hop into an NSO game than, scrolling down and trying to find where the specific NSO app is located on your home screen. I've always wanted them to make one central NSO app where all of the games offered on the service are located, and they've essentially done that with this new NSO icon on the Switch 2, and I really think it makes a world of difference. It's something I'm going to use a lot now. If I feel like going back to a retro game, I'm probably not going to open the app itself. I'm going to click on that NSO icon and I'm going to open the game. So I think that's a really slept on addition to the Switch 2. It does exist on the Switch 1. That NSO app is part of the Switch 1's firmware, but it's so slow on the Switch 1 that it's not even worth using. On the Switch 2, it is a big addition because it runs really smoothly. And in there, you can also see rewards and profile icons and all sorts of fun little stuff. It is a very valuable app that I just never wanted to go to on the Switch 1 because it chugged so much. On the Switch 2, that problem is completely gone. And I think it's a really valuable addition to NSO now. Having that centralized app where you can see all of the different offers and features given to you with your subscription. Well, those are my thoughts on the hardware itself, but let's talk about Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, the big controversial paid tech demo for the new Nintendo console. I, of course, bought it. I pre-ordered the damn thing because I knew I was going to talk about it on the channel, and also I was just morbidly curious about what they could be hiding in this app that would make it worth the $10 price of admission. And I'm here to say, I guess in a vacuum, the game is worth $10, but I'm not really sure if it's actually worth $10. Does that make sense? I'm gonna read you the paragraph I wrote on Backlogged about the game, because I think it gives a more succinct version of what I'm trying to say. Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is a cute tech demo. There are some fascinating tidbits hidden in its various minigames, tech demos, and quizzes that delve deep into the R&D of the Switch 2. I had more fun with this game than the 2.5 stars would indicate, but I must give it a low rating out of principle. This 100% should have been included with the system. Welcome Tour pales in comparison to a pack-in like Astro's Playroom, even if its breadth of content might justify the $10 price point in a vacuum. That said, it includes at least 3 mentions of the Wii U, so Game of the Year. That last part obviously is a bit, but I think that encapsulates my thoughts on Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. In a vacuum, gun to my head, all of the phrases you want to use, it probably is worth $20. Not $20, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It probably is worth $10, right? I spent 15 hours with the game. I played all the mini games. A lot of them are pretty fun, and I think the information about the Switch 2's development is really cool. There are a lot of interesting little details about the Switch 2. I mean, there's a paragraph in there describing the process they went through to come up with the stitching on the JoyCon 2 straps. Every little detail of this system, as you would imagine, was labored over and thought over a lot, and all of those thoughts are contained in this app. I'm holding up the strap like it's the game. Now, this is just a JoyCon 2 strap, but all of the thoughts they had when developing the Nintendo Switch 2 are contained in this app, and I think that's really cool. And that's why I wish it was free, so that more people could see how cool this is. Charging $10 for this game ensures that people are going to hate it and most people aren't going to buy it, just out of principle. And I even gave it 2.5 stars just out of principle because I like the game, but you compare it to a game like Astro's Playroom, which is this whole platformer that shows you the features of the PS5, and you think, what are we even doing here? Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is a piece of crap in comparison to Astro's Playroom. I mean, that game has so much personality and charm and fun, and not to say that Switch 2 Welcome Tour is devoid of those things, but it certainly isn't overflowing with them. So that's what irks me about this game. The $10 price point is just kind of ridiculous in principle, and it clouds all discussion about this game. If you say anything good about it, you're a shill. If you say anything bad about it, you're a broke boy. I don't know, I'm in the middle. I think it's cute, but it really should have been a pack-in. The tech demos and mini games, though, are really cool. There's some really fun ways they use the technology in this system in those mini games. The mini games where you use the gyro and the mouse in combination are especially interesting, whether it's the one where you try to fit the little blocks into the holes, or the one where you drive the car and you have to use the mouse to move it left and right, but you use the gyro to move it to the side. It's very weird, and it's very interesting how specific these movements can be with those JoyCons. Like with the Switch 1 JoyCons, there's a lot of cool little technology packed into these controllers. And I think unlike the Switch 1 JoyCons, the technology is a little bit more functional. And we're going to see that in games coming out the next few years for Nintendo, I'm sure. But Welcome Tour is a fun little introduction to all of this technology in the system. I also thought the tech demo where you play Mario Bros. On one big screen in 4K was very cool. It is funny to think about how far video games have come in these 40 years. So if you're a video game geek like me and you're interested in all of these little details of the new Nintendo console and what decisions went into developing the damn thing, I think you're gonna really like Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and I would say it's worth $10. But if you're not really into that and you just want another thing to play on your Switch 2, you might be left a little disappointed because this isn't a game. It is a tech demo. It's a really fun and cute tech demo, similar to Astro's Playroom, but it's just a tech demo, and that's why it should have been a pack-in. Even if, in terms of dollars to hours, this is probably worth the $10 price of entry. I will say the $10 price point does interest and excite me a little bit in terms of the fact that I think we might be getting back to that, WiiWare, DSiWare era for Nintendo, where they're offering a lot more digital experiences for cheaper prices. You saw it a few years ago with Kirby's Dream Buffet. You saw it last year with Nintendo World Championships. You saw it this year, obviously, with Welcome Tour coming out for $10. And then Dragon Drive coming out this summer is a digital-only game as well. I would imagine that game's not going to be more than $30. And we heard those rumors about Arc System Works working on 1 or 2 digital-only games for the Switch 2 as well. I would imagine those are going to be cheaper priced games too. So if Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is the beginning of Nintendo doing more variable priced digital-only games, I think that is a really cool thing, and it's something they did so well in the Wii era and the DS era and even the 3DS era, supplementing their big physical releases with smaller little digital games. And with how taxing and time-consuming 4K game development is, it's going to be important to have smaller games like even a Switch 2 Welcome Tour or a Dragon Drive to fill out their schedule, because I don't think they're going to be able to ship a Switch 2 game every month. I just don't think that's going to be possible in this new era of 4K gaming. But if they can ship a big Switch 2 game every 2 or 3 months, say, and then fill in the holes with little small Kirby's Dream Buffet-esque games, I think that could be a really interesting and fun strategy for Nintendo, and it would give us a lot of weird little games like Kirby's Dream Buffet and like Switch 2 Welcome Tour and like Dragon Drive, all of which have their flaws and none of which were incredible experiences, but all of which came at a pretty fair price of, $30-ish. I'm assuming, again, that Dragon Drive isn't going to go past that $30 price point. But again, that is just speculation, and for all we know, Dragon Drive is going to be a $70 digital game, and we're all just gonna have to deal with it. I hope not, though. I hope this is the beginning of variable pricing for Nintendo, where they use the entire range of $10 all the way up to $80. I mean, I hope they don't use the $80 price point again, to be fair. But if they are gonna use the $80 price point, you know, use the $20 and the $30 and the $40 price point as well. I think that could work out well for everyone involved. So it's something to monitor. We'll have to see, but I think Switch 2 Welcome Tour could be a sign of things to come for Nintendo and a sign of exciting things to come at that. But that is gonna do it for this video. Those are my thoughts on the Switch 2's hardware and my small thoughts on Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Tell me in the comments, did you pick up the Switch 2? If so, are you loving it? Are you hating it? Are you excited? Are you disappointed? Let me know. Also, tell me, did you pick up Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour? If you did, why did you pick it up? Did you like it? If you didn't, why didn't you? Why doesn't it interest you? I mean, I think that's a pretty obvious answer, but tell me anyway in the comments below. It's a party. I'm going to be responding to every single one of them. So make sure to let your thoughts be heard. With all that said, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that big fat button. I am in the process of writing my Mario Kart World review. It's pretty lengthy. It's gonna be a banger, so stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for all sorts of stuff around the gaming industry. I thought there was gonna be a Direct this month. Seems like that's not gonna be the case, but there's a DK Direct coming on Wednesday. I'll do a video on that. I'll do a video on a lot of different things. It's gonna be a fun summer for gaming, and you don't want to miss any of it, so make sure to sub to the channel. Share the video with a friend who is hyped about the Nintendo Switch 2, or a friend who's on the edge, who doesn't know if they want to buy a Switch 2 or not. Maybe this video will convince them. Who knows? Share it anyway. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.